Blog Talk Radio.
The views of individual hosts.
Thanks for tuning in to Stripped Radio, where it's real, it's raw, it's real raw radio. Get ready to bear it all and get stripped.
The views of individual hosts, guest speakers, and callers are not necessarily the views of Stripped or Blog Talk Radio. Warning: moderate to heavy language. Not suitable for children under the age of 18.
Here we are again, guys. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Barbie.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling better. My voice is still all jacked up, but
yeah.
I'm going to do the best I can.
I should have told you today before we got on the show to do some tea with honey and lemon.
Oh, yeah, everybody's been giving me advice. Oh, vinegar, this, vinegar, that, honey, lemon, tea.
Well,
just need to shut up and leave me alone. What?
We didn't play an intro song because of the reason being that this show is so in-depth with both our guest speakers. Larry Hohol. Welcome, Larry.
Hello there. Glad to be with you.
We're glad to have you.
See you again, Larry. It's been a while.
Yes, it has.
And Larry's going to be doing an update on the Worse Than Rodney King, Robert Leone story. You can go back to our archives and you can find the original broadcast, or even after the show, I'll just post it under this event on Facebook and you can listen to the original one. But Larry, I'm going to let you go ahead and start with giving us an update, or let's kind of go over a brief synopsis of what happened with Robert and then what's going on with him now.
Okay, for anyone that's not up to speed with this particular story, this is a story of police brutality that occurred in Pennsylvania by the Pennsylvania State Police. Five Pennsylvania state troopers were involved. The incident was videotaped. It was audio and video on numerous dash cams of the state police cars. And a motorist, Robert Leone, who was a New York State resident and lived right on the borderline with Pennsylvania, had crossed over the border and the state police was trying to pull him over. They thought originally that he was involved in a minor hit-and-run accident with no injuries or no real damage to anything, but it matched the description of his car. Robert had some issues. Originally, he was diagnosed with bipolar condition. He was put on medication that actually made him worse instead of better, and you know that story. The short version of this is that Robert did not pull over when he was instructed to do so by the state police, but did not try to get away at high speeds, or there was no high-speed chase involved. As a matter of fact, testimony by the state troopers indicated that Robert was driving well under the speed limit and just simply refused to pull over. He eventually...
I watched that video.
Go ahead.
It's okay. I watched that video, and Michelle's seen it too, but Robert actually does slow down and scoot over to the right like he's letting the officer, or trying to let the officer pass him. I noticed that in the video.
Yeah, I interviewed Robert numerous times and have met Robert and spent time with him. And originally he thought that these troopers were on their way to an emergency, so he did pull off to the side of the road and didn't stop, but went very, very slow. And when they didn't pass him, he made a bad decision. He decided he wasn't going to pull over. So a low speed, it wasn't even a chase, it was a following, occurred, and eventually he was stop stick in what they call a pit maneuver. I am a former police officer, just for a little background on me. What happened after he was stopped is all videotaped, and it's probably the most clear-cut case of police brutality that it's right up there with the videos where riots were conducted after people saw what happened. I mean, it's pretty horrendous what they did. beating a prisoner after they are in custody, and they are compliant and handcuffed. Beating that prisoner violates the Geneva Convention, for crying out loud, let alone civilian rules of engagement. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. That video was horrifying, absolutely horrifying.
And
I was yelling at the screen, going, "Oh my God, no! Stop! What are they doing?" You know.
Unfortunately, the worst beatings occurred at the state police barracks, and we never got our hands on those videos. So what you saw in the video.
The hospital video?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Did you ever get your hands on the hospital video?
Robert's law firm never subpoenaed the hospital video, nor did they ever subpoena the videos from the barracks, and that's something I want to speak to as we go on here with the interview.
The picture. Let me ask you this: the picture that comes up with Robert Leone's name, is that a mugshot or is that just a photo from the hospital?
That is a mugshot.
Okay. So if anybody wants to Google that, you can see this man. He's just one big bruise. It's absolutely disgusting that law enforcement did this to anyone, let alone an American citizen.
Right.
So.
Go ahead, Larry.
Go ahead.
Okay. What happened? Robert was charged with an assortment of I would consider to be bogus charges. They charged him with 24 different counts, including one of the counts was assault on a police officer, because one of the troopers, while punching Robert in the face with a closed fist, broke his hand. So he was charged with assaulting a police officer basically with his face. And I'm not kidding. That really happened. And
I know. I read it.
Yeah, I mean, that's all part of the court record. I mean, it's amazing. And what's so bizarre on top of all of this is that the district attorney of Bradford County went along with it and prosecuted Robert. He had in his possession these very videos. And for him to prosecute anybody for breaking a state trooper's hand with his face it's beyond bizarre. But that's pretty much the norm in Bradford County, Pennsylvania, from what I'm being told by the residents of Bradford County. It's pretty bizarre.
Were these troopers ever charged for anything on the assault against Robert?
They were sued civilly in federal court, and they were never charged with anything criminal. We contacted the FBI. Did exhibit signs of being very interested in pursuing this case. They actually interviewed the family for 4.5 hours and copied every single document that the family had in their possession, including the videotapes. And they took that information to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that's where it died a natural death. It was never pursued by the U.S. Attorney. The FBI would not normally take something like that to the U.S. Attorney unless they were looking for guidance, either to they had a pretty good idea they wanted to pursue it, or they wouldn't have taken it to the U.S. Attorney, and we can't figure out for the life of us why the U.S. Attorney didn't pursue it. But there is, believe it or not, talk about a coincidence. There is a Pennsylvania state trooper in northeastern Pennsylvania that has the same exact name as the U.S. Attorney, and we've been trying to find out if he's a relative or not.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that.
So how is Robert doing today?
Robert is not doing. Yeah, but Robert is not doing very well. He has had a lot of setbacks medically. He has been under treatment from a variety of doctors, and he got very severe brain damage from all of this. It's Robert was an honor student from Binghamton University. He graduated with a degree in economics. He was recruited by some Wall Street companies that wanted to hire him, and he chose not to go. But Robert was a very intelligent person, but he is permanently scarred now. He is permanently injured from this.
So you said there was a civil case. How did that go, or has that been completed yet?
Well, let me finish up the criminal side of this, because it plays into the civil side. The district attorney went along with the 24 counts brought against Robert, and a jury found Robert not guilty on 20 of the 24 counts. Only 4 of the counts Robert was found guilty of. None of them were the major counts. None of them were the felonies. They were relatively minor in nature. But the judge in the case really didn't like what the jury had done. So rather than Robert's sentence being time served, which would have been more than appropriate, because he sat in jail for 6 months waiting to go to trial, the judge sentenced him to 2.5 to 4 years. Now, a year and a half to 4, I'm sorry, and he spent 2.5 in jail.
Wow.
Okay, now we'll transition.
And that judge is still on the bar, or still on the bench?
It's kind of strange what happened with that judge. He ran for re-election and won. His re-election bid. And about 2 years into his 10-year term, he retired prior to mandatory retirement age. And we don't understand that. We don't know why, and we'll probably never will know why.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Continue. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I'll transition over into the civil side of this. Robert's mother contacted me while Robert was still in jail, and because I had written a book about corruption in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I basically, after I heard the story she had on the phone, I told her that I really didn't think there was much I could do to help her, because it was Robert's word against 5 Pennsylvania state troopers, and a jury would always believe the state troopers. And then when she told me she had the videotape of everything that she had told me had happened, I was like, really? I mean, you really do? Mm-hmm. So she sent me the DVD, and I watched it, and I simply couldn't believe what I was seeing. And at that point, I decided I would at least try to help the family in trying to get some sort of justice. Little did I know where we would end up. The video that's on YouTube, Worse Than Rodney King, is the name of the video. It's going to hit 250,000 views shortly. It was originally put together by me to get Robert a law firm to take his case civilly. So it's 18 minutes long. There's parts of it that are tedious. It was never put together to put on YouTube for general consumption. So I'll tell you that ahead of time. There are parts that are a bit dry, but it was effective. We sent the video out to 8 law firms in Pennsylvania. 6 of them immediately responded and expressed interest in taking Robert's case. I suspect the 2 that didn't respond didn't watch the video. Okay, so right. the family then decided which law firm they wanted, and it was a very large law firm out of Pittsburgh, and they wanted the case so badly that they then sweetened the pie, if you will, or by offering $100,000 worth of free legal assistance in Robert's criminal appeal of those 4 convictions I talked about earlier. $100,000 out of their own pocket. So, I mean, we knew these guys were serious, and they knew that the evidence was overwhelming in this case, that wrong had been done, okay? So family chose that law firm, and off to the races we went. Well, it wasn't long after that the firm signed on the dotted line. the original attorney that was handling Robert's case left the law firm and went to another firm. And we noticed at that point there was a real change in attitude and a real change in the overall, what we felt was the effectiveness of the law firm. They weren't sending subpoenas out for things that we thought were extremely relevant. And the family documented all of these things to the attorneys on a regular basis. So all of those letters documenting failure to pursue evidence are in the record. We have all that. So it comes time finally for the trial, and I flew up. I live in Florida now. I flew up for the trial, and 3 days into the trial, I threw my hands up in the courtroom and walked out of the federal courthouse and said, "This case is not going to end the way we are hoping." It was so obvious to me what was going on, and there was another attorney in the where guests can watch the trial that I was talking to, and he just said, "I can't believe what these guys are doing. They're blowing this case." I said, "No, they're not blowing it. It looks like they're intentionally losing it. It's just incredible. It's incredible. I mean, how could this be?" And lo and behold, the fifth day, the Friday, it went to the jury, and it came back innocent on all charges, all troopers, and they walked away from it. And that's the update. That's where we're at now. We have the family. Robert, with the help of his family, did file with the federal judge that heard the case a motion for a new trial due to inadequate representation. I strongly suspect that will not be granted, but the family is very, very active now in pursuing a malpractice suit against the law firm that represented them.
Good.
And I'll give you one real good indication of how badly this was done. I mean, it was worse than watching a grade school play production, because it was so phony, and it was so unrealistic what was presented. It was embarrassing to watch these attorneys throw this case the way they did. They sued 5 Pennsylvania state troopers. They did not call a single trooper to the stand during the trial. Not one of them. They didn't even put them on the stand to identify them and say, "You're a Pennsylvania state trooper, this is your name, this is the video that we're showing the jury, is that you in the video?" Never even did that, let alone put them up there.
Did the jury get to see the video that you put together?
Say it again?
Did the jury get to see the video that you put together?
No.
See, because it was well documented. You did such a great job on it, and it was so well documented. You showed, the paper and circled everything in yellow.
Are you talking
and everything.
about the narrated one, the narrated video?
Yes.
Yeah, realistically, that it would not have been appropriate for them to put my version of what I was observing in front of the jury.
That's
I mean,
there's the jury.
I mean, what they did do was they did pull out certain segments of the original dash cam, but not nearly the amount of information and the amount of video that they should have shown the jury. It was painful to sit there and say, why didn't you show that to the jury? Why didn't you show that part? Why didn't you show that part? I mean, it's just amazing. It was so difficult to be there and watch it. So that is the update. The family is still waiting for the judge to rule on the inadequate representation, and they're, like I said, they're very actively involved now in the process of identifying and interviewing law firms that actually go after other law firms for malpractice. That's what they're in the process of doing now.
Nice.
So to sum it up,
go ahead, Barbie.
Michelle. Go ahead, Michelle.
You said they had they did a civil suit against the police department?
Against the Pennsylvania State Police, that's correct.
Yes, okay. Did they win? Is that final?
No, that's the case I was just talking about, where the law firm basically rolled over and they lost.
Okay.
Yeah, they lost. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So my question is, or not question, it's a comment, is basically so far Robert crap beat out of him by these police and sat in jail, and that's pretty much it.
Unfortunately, that's pretty accurate.
I mean, I'm not trying to say, the beating was, appropriate in any way, shape, or form. I'm saying this is what happened, and nobody's standing up, besides you and Robert's family, to help this kid. I mean, that video is horrific, and I've watched it more than once. I tell people about it all the time, and they're like, no way, and I've got like a 92-inch TV, so I put it on my TV and sit there, and every single time I see something different. And that one charge that you talk about, where the police officer punched him and they charged him for breaking the police officer's hand with his face.
Correct.
Did the jury, the criminal or the civil case jury, did they hear that testimony at all?
I honestly don't recall that portion of it ever being presented to the jury. It may have been, but I think I would have remembered that because that's pretty much a slam dunk. What is so disheartening with all of this is that all of the safety nets that are supposed to be in place to make sure things like this, first of all, don't happen, and then if they do happen, they get corrected. None of them, not only didn't they work, but they operated in concert with the cover-up. The Internal Affairs Department of the Pennsylvania State Police did an internal investigation. To this day, Robert, their family had filed a complaint. They have never been able to get a copy of the results of that internal investigation, even though a portion of that report was used in his criminal trial against Robert. And Robert's defense attorney said, wait a minute, you can't use a part of a report to bolster your case and not show us the entire report. You can't do it. It's against the rules. And the judge basically ruled tough. That's exactly what we're going to do, and it's tough. And to this day, Robert or his family have never seen a copy of that report, and they're the ones that filed the complaint.
Wow.
And the law firm that represented them in the civil case should have subpoenaed that, and they didn't.
Right. Well, that original law firm needs to be held accountable too, as well as the officers, as well as their commanding officer, as well as the judge, as well as the mayor, and even go as far as the governor.
Now, do you realize how crazy we sound? I mean, we're on this show right now, basically saying that the entire system is broken. I mean, everything, all the way through. The judge is broken.
I don't know that it's broken, but it's definitely flawed. There's something there, with that, in that string of the justice area, that it's broken right there. Yes, I mean, for the most part, the justice system, it equals out, it evens out generally. But there are those extreme cases like this that, it's unbelievable, the domino effect that it has, when you go down the line. Even as far as the U.S. attorney passed out of it.
We went as far as the family went and filed a complaint with the Department of Justice, the DOJ in Washington. And you want to talk about pulling teeth. To get anybody to even talk to you down there is, if they spend 3 minutes of their time talking to us low-life peasants, we should consider ourselves to be very, very fortunate. But the short version of that is they told us it would take 90 days to review the case. It took over a year. It got handed from one person to another, to another, to another, to another. And when the final determination was made that the Department of Justice was not going to do anything, they simply said, one sentence, they said it did not meet their guidelines. So we responded and said, what are the guidelines, and who determined they didn't meet the guidelines?
Constitutional rights don't meet their guidelines?
Yeah. Well, their response was, we don't have to tell you anything, and don't contact us anymore. And that was it.
Wow.
That was it. That was the end of it.
Let me ask you, in your opinion, and speculation is what it is, why do you think that his attorneys represented him in the manner which they did, which caused him to lose his case?
Well, I couldn't figure it out for the longest time because they spent a lot of money actually preparing the case, even though they didn't do it correctly. And I found out that in federal court, if you prevail and let's say you only win $1, that's all you have to do. $1 is awarded to you for injuries, for punishment, for whatever reason. The law firm can then petition the court for all of their fees. So they probably had, and I'm probably being conservative here, between $300,000 and $400,000 involved in this case. They were expecting the jury to find the trooper, at least one trooper, guilty of something. And they didn't care if it was a $1 award, a $1,000 award, or a $500,000 award, or a $5 million award. They didn't care as long as there was an award. So they did what they felt was the minimum to get some sort of an award. And they would be made whole. They would get all of their money. They would have played ball with the attorney general. The attorney general represented the state troopers in this case and defended them because they were state police. And who knows what's going on there? I mean, that's just I would be speculating big time. I have no idea, but something didn't feel right. So they would have gotten all their fees. They would have gotten all of their money from the court, and all they needed to do was win $1. And they truly, I believe, they felt they were going to get something, and they miscalculated. The jury just said no to all of it. So they walked away. I hope they're really, no, I don't, but I'm being sarcastic with what I was going to say is I hope they're really rewarded somewhere down the road because they lost a ton of money on this. And there's no way a first-year law student could watch what they did and wring their hands and go, this is crazy. This is something's wrong.
Well, apparently they got what they deserved. If they were only going to do a half-assed job, why should they be rewarded at all? It shouldn't have been about the money. It should have been about justice. And
well,
what is right
I'm
and what is wrong.
Before we close here, I want to share this with you. This is something that never came out in the papers about this case, but Robert was offered a $5 million settlement before he actually walked in for the trial. Either the day of the trial or I think it was the day of the trial. He was herded into a side room, and they made him that offer. And the stipulation was that he would have to sign papers and never reveal and never discuss anything that happened. He would be bound to be silent about this. And he said there was no way that was going to happen. He wanted to expose it. So he basically walked away from being a millionaire in order to try to expose this, and that's what happened.
Well, there's some things that are more important than money. I mean, there's a lot of things that are more important.
Yep.
Integrity. Justice.
Yeah, but the system of support is really supposed to support people with integrity, and the system doesn't. It doesn't.
Well, that law firm failed him, and that law firm, they didn't get rewarded anything. Which, they did a half-assed job. They shouldn't be rewarded for anything.
I agree.
They should be responsible, and they should be held responsible for whatever it's called, the lack of whatever.
Malpractice. One of the other things I want to let the listeners know, because I've been so active in things like this and other cases, is that I am backing away from all of this and refocusing my, what I need to do to work on my business and to take care of my family and things like that. And as much as I would like to help as many people as possible, it's put such a burden on my business, on my family, on my children, on everything around me. And to see this type of a conclusion and knowing what the reality of it was and where we ended up is so disheartening. And it's basically, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but it's a waste of my time.
I read that on Facebook, and I totally understood it when you posted that you needed to back away from this because, like I said, I've had hundreds of emails and people messaging me on Facebook about their case and what can we do to help. And I'm by far not a police officer, a retired police officer. As far as I know, Michelle's not either, and I'm not in the business of law. So all I can do is try to make connections and help people get their story out. But in doing that, we got to wean through these people because just because somebody says something happened doesn't mean it necessarily happened the exact way they said it did or that they're not guilty of a crime. And
right. Well, there's always three sides to the story. There's your side, there's their side, and somewhere in the middle lies the truth.
Right.
Let me holler out real quick and just let Mike know. I see you there, and we're winding down here in a minute, and we're going to bring you on in just a few minutes.
So, Larry, you were involved in the Kids for Cash, weren't you?
Well, superficially, I wrote a book about the very same courthouse where the Kids for Cash scandal occurred. And it was directly about a case that involved me, and I was a self-made multi-millionaire, and I became embroiled in civil litigation after I sold the company to some not-so-nice people from St. Louis. And how the whole thing went down and how the judicial system didn't operate and protect me, I wrote a whole book about it, and it's well documented. It's all true. And fortunately, when I was going through my trials and tribulations, both of the local newspapers in Wilkes-Barre followed my case on a daily basis, and they gave me permission to reprint all the newspaper articles that they had written about my case and what was happening and how outrageous it was, and they're all included as copies in the book. Along with some actual documentation from the case, but what I uncovered in that courthouse and all the way through the system was a layer of corruption that goes all the way to Harrisburg in Pennsylvania, including the Judicial Conduct Board, which oversees all of the judges in Pennsylvania. It is probably the most corrupt organization that I've ever been exposed to in my life. And I had firsthand dealings with that board. And I actually became friends with a former board member who tried to expose the corruption. And he actually had to move out of the country. He's living in Costa Rica now because of the things that they did to him. And he was a very, very successful attorney in Pennsylvania. And it was a voluntary position that he took on that Judicial Conduct Board as a favor to the governor, and he ended up losing everything that he had in his life because he tried to expose how badly and how corrupt that organization is. So isn't
it amazing how strong greed can be?
Yeah.
You know,
the name of the book
incredible.
is the name of my book is The Luzerne County Railroad, and that's named Luzerne, Luzerne County, and railroad. Even story doesn't have any trains in it. It's about being railroaded. But I've done very, very well with the book. It's sold through Barnes & Noble. I set a record at their mega store at my book signing, and that record still stands today, selling out all of the copies in less than 15 minutes on a 2-hour signing. It was the line was out the door and around the corner.
Right.
Wow.
Right. See, and you take this corruption there in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, of all places, the most corrupt area that you've been involved in. And, multiply that times at least 50 with the states because, there's got to be one in every state, at least, if not more. I mean, that's how much corruption. And don't even get me started on the Obama administration. It's just,
yeah.
Right. Don't get started on
and
it,
that's at the very top. So how do we even have, it's like, how do we even have a chance at anything, at real justice?
Right now, we don't. We truly don't. If politics gets involved in any case that you're involved in, you better figure out a way to settle it because it's a free for all out there. It's the Wild West. You would have a better chance in the Wild West by learning how to shoot your 6-gun straight than you would in the judicial system, especially in Pennsylvania. The deck is so stacked. It is beyond belief.
No, I believe it.
I believe it. In closing, Larry, I'm so thankful for you to come back on the show and giving us an update. I know that you're probably not going to do any more shows considering you're trying to get away from all this, and who could blame you? But in closing, do you have any final words?
No. Well.
Oh, that's a good one.
Well, I really one of the reasons I was when I was asked to come back on the show that I so quickly said yes is because you guys are just stellar, and you saw what was going on with this case early on, and you allowed me to come onto the show and present what I had and let people go to the website and go to the YouTube video and make their own determinations. And it's people like you that will make a difference overall. It's going to be a long, long process. But it's the exposure, it's the anger that the American people are feeling right now, especially in this presidential election cycle, is epic. I'm going to turn 60 years old this year in June, and I have never in my lifetime seen this type of emotion on both sides. It's incredible. And this is, fortunately I say this is how we have revolutions in the United States. We don't get out guns and go kill people. We have elections. And that's what makes us different than countries in all over the world that they have military coups and they take over their governments and it's just one vicious cycle. We have elections, and once the people become energized to the point where we are now, and we are beyond anything, like I said, anything I've ever seen in my lifetime. There will be some very dramatic changes, and hopefully they'll be for the better.
Well, you're a very young 60.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for the kind words.
Yes, thank you so much.
Well,
we don't really get to hear that side of it sometimes. We don't really know if we're making any headway or not. And it was really nice of you to say that, and I greatly appreciate it. And I know that Michelle, with her squeaky little voice, appreciates it too.
My squeaky toy voice.
All right. Well, I hope you're feeling better.
Thank you. I am. As soon as I get my voice back, I'll be 100%.
Good. Go get them, girl.
We want to thank you for being on the show. We'll definitely stay in touch, even though it won't necessarily be about any cases or anything. But it's about that time to bring Mike on. And so thank you once again, and we will talk on Facebook and email.
Okay.
It was a
Thank
pleasure,
you.
Larry.
My pleasure. Take care.
Larry.
Enjoy that Florida sun.
All right. Hi, Mike. I'm not bringing you on just yet. I feel like we need to play our disclaimer before I put you on because you're going to open up a can of worms.
The views of individual hosts, guest speakers, and callers are not necessarily the views of Stripped or Blog Talk Radio. Warning: moderate to heavy language, not suitable for children under the age of 18.
Hey, Mike.
Hello?
Mike? Hi.
Yes. Oh, good. Can you hear me?
Mike.
I have two 412 numbers.
Yes.
I have a 343 and a 377. Which one's you?
377.
Okay. All right. So you've been on here for a while. Mike, welcome to the show. I want to say thank you for coming on. I'm glad that you're here, but I'm sorry for the circumstance. This is Barbie. I'm the one that you've been talking to on the phone, and Michelle is in Arizona. So let him hear your voice so he can.
Hi, Mike.
Hello, Michelle.
I've gotten a brief rundown about your history, your situation, and my heart goes out to you. And I'm really I'm excited to hear the details because I understand your story. It goes from wild to crazy to bizarre. So it's one of those stories that we're just going to have to take little by little and put it all together, I guess.
Yeah.
So everybody that's listening, buckle up and hang on. This is going to be a hell of a ride.
So, Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself. And I know you and I had talked about doing sequels because you've got your hands in so many pots. Today we wanted to focus on what happened with your child and the Catholic Church and all that. So go ahead and introduce yourself and let's go.
Well, hello, Barb and Michelle. This is Mike Ferentz calling from Pittsburgh. How's everybody out there today?
I'm doing well. Michelle's got a bit of laryngitis.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but I hope you recover as soon as possible. And I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to be on your show today. Although following Larry is that's a tough that's a tough act to follow. I'll do my best though.
You know what? Right. Since you mentioned Larry's name, I forgot to tell him thank you for introducing us and getting us in touch with each other. So I hope he's still listening.
Well, if not, I promise to send him an email tonight because I heard him on this show. He always does such a great job.
Yeah, he's really good. But I was telling Michelle that I spent about 15 minutes on the phone with you, and it was a whirlwind. So the floor is yours, my dear.
All righty. December 5th, 1989, my wife and I get that call at 8 o'clock in the morning that every parent dreads. Get down to the hospital. It happened to be McKeesport Hospital. Your son was in an accident. We had no idea what was going on. I recognized the voice on the other end, and I immediately hung up, called back just to make sure it wasn't some sort of a ruse or whatever, and obviously I knew beforehand that it wasn't. Anyway, we make our way to the McKeesport Hospital, not knowing any idea what was going on. We actually got there before any of the, my son got there and the shooter in this case. The scary part was when they wheeled in the first gurney. The entire body was...
You said the shooter. Your son was the shooter?
No. My son was the victim.
Okay.
But they wheeled in the first gurney from the ambulance. The body was completely covered. And the best I could do was shout out, "If that's my son, Adam, let him know his parents are here." Probably seconds later, another gurney comes in, and it was my son. I could see his face. I could see that he was at least alert. He was sitting partially up, like you would in a lounge chair. And I shouted over to him that we're here, that everything's going to be okay. Shortly thereafter is, you don't just barge into an emergency room and say what's going on. So we waited to be escorted in. While we were waiting, a disheveled McKeesport detective walked up to my wife and me with a brown bag or white bag, I don't remember, pulls a handgun out of the bag and said, "Does this gun belong to you?" We were shocked, scared, and we said no. He says, "How about your son?" I said, "My son wouldn't even know how to shoot a gun." And then a teacher from Sarah Catholic High School came over and said, "Those are the wrong parents." I should have known from that point on that this, at the very, very best, the McKeesport police would have handled this like the the Keystone Cops on the old Barney Miller show, and I feel bad for dragging those great actors down to this, but I had to compare it to something.
Right.
Anyway, to advance a few minutes forward, I go into the emergency room where my son is, and I noticed the boy next door in a bed with the drapery pulled around, and I could see the blood oozing down the sheets. And my head was like the head watching a ping pong match as it bounced back and forth. I looked at the blood on the sheets and the blood on the back of my son's head and the hole in his head. And I said, "Dear God, I promise you I will do whatever I can to make this good." I had no idea what I was promising. No way did I think my son could actually harm someone, but I immediately said to myself, could he have tripped someone and the gun went off accidentally? So that was my pledge to God, and here we are over 25 years later. I'm still trying to satisfy God by getting this job done. But
it happened 25 years ago?
Yes, yeah. It happened 25 years ago. Over 25.
Wow.
But anyway, 1989. I'm still trying to get the job done, but you have to remember, and this is a nice follow-up to Larry's, judges, elected officials, police, throw them all in. In Pennsylvania, they are bought and sold like stolen merchandise at an outdoor flea market. And again, I want to apologize to the folks who make a living at a flea market because I should not really compare them to Pennsylvania judges or elected officials. But that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the Roman coward church. I'm not making fun of their teachings because the reason why I'm here talking to you today is because of the teachings that I learned when I was growing up Catholic. Truth be told, most of the priests are not priests. Most of the bishops are not bishops. Most of the cardinals are not cardinals. At best, they are cowards for not stepping forward. The rest of them, I would call them male prostitutes, including Donald World from the Washington, D.C. Archdiocese.
Hold on a second. I think I need to...
the Catholic Church is the most corrupt organization in the religious world that there has ever been since Jesus walked the earth.
I have to agree with you. What I know based on my 25 years of investigating these folks, they're ruthless cowards. They're not, some people try to label them homosexuals. I have no idea what type of sexual orientation they actually have. I call them dysfunctional sex freaks. The boy who shot my son, he raised the gun to the back of his head, pulled the trigger, then pointed the gun to his right temple and pulled the trigger again. Everything from that moment on was covered up.
So do we know why he shot your son?
All the evidence points to the fact that he was probably sexually abused by a priest by the name of Father John Wellinger.
You say probably. What does that mean?
We never found a smoking gun, but John Wellinger was a credibly accused priest who would end up being laicized
from place to place.
Yes, transferred from place
around?
to place. Yes,
Yep.
and one of the times when I went to the state police on him, he would just pick up and leave his parish and move in with another priest. His name was Richard Bush. And supposedly he may have been John Wellinger's lover that they met in the seminary. So that's how the Roman coward church works. There's no accountability. Go ahead.
That's kind of par for the course, considering that how they speak out so adamantly against homosexuality.
Right.
You know, and they're worse than molest child. These guys are predators, and they've got the church is their flock, the sheep that these wolves feed on, and they allow it, and they change them around and move them from this place to that place, and the cycle just continues. Instead of stepping up and putting an end to it all, they just sweep it under the rug and act like nothing ever happened. And I think that's the worst crime that they could be doing, because it's children that we're talking about, children.
If you don't mind, I'd like to break away for a minute and advance to the most recent scathing scandal in Pennsylvania that involves the Altoona Johnstown Diocese. What took place there, I actually coined the term synchronized crime. Now, we all know what organized crime is, and that's tough enough to combat. But synchronized crime is the absolute loyalty to a criminal organization. It's the absolute loyalty and submission to a criminal organization by government officials and law enforcement officials. And the scandal that took place in the Altoona Johnstown Diocese explains it precisely. I was years ahead of all the other investigators in Pennsylvania, because I coined this term about 5 years ago. What they found in the Altoona Johnstown Diocese is that the bishops were actually selecting who was going to be the police chief of some of the towns. They decided the bishops decided, along with the help of police and elected officials, that they were going to just move these priests around. The U.S. Attorney for Western Pennsylvania is currently looking at the Altoona Diocese to apply the RICO Act, which is basically how you deal with organized crime. I had a call into the U.S. Attorney's office. They were supposed to respond by letting me talk to an FBI agent or another investigator, because I am fielding calls from reporters throughout Pennsylvania, not in my hometown, not in my home county, but throughout Pennsylvania, who want to know the connection between Donald Wuerl, the Pittsburgh Diocese, and Allegheny County DA Stephen Zappala Jr.
Okay, so what is it? What is the connection?
Number one, in 2000, well, first of all, you have to understand who the Zappalas are. The Zappalas go back to Prohibition. Go ahead.
I was saying, okay, I was agreeing with you.
Okay. The Zappala name goes back to Prohibition. The grandfather or the great-grandfather came over, I forget his first name, but he brought his sons and daughters. So they were the first generation. There were actually two generations that were the first generation. Frank Zappala, who is the grandfather of our DA, was actually the attorney for John Bisano Sr. John Bisano Sr. was a Pittsburgh mob boss. He was married to Frank's sister, Rose. So when I tell you that Frank Zappala probably coached John Bisano Sr. into killing the Volpe brothers, there's some reason there to believe it, because Frank wouldn't want his sister Rose to be a widow. In other words, Frank probably suggested to John Sr., you're going to have to whack the Volpes before they whack you first. So that's number one. That's the first connection with the mob. If we advance now to the 1990s or so, there was a fellow by the name of Chucky Porter who was the mob underboss to a Pittsburgh mobster by the name of Michael Genovese. Now, the underboss knows everything that the mob boss knows, except for one thing, and that is this. If the boss is going to whack the underboss, that's the only thing he might not know. Anyway, Chucky Porter was a underboss who literally shoveled tons and tons of heroin, cocaine, and other drugs into Western Pennsylvania. He would be sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. He would get a jail card pass from the federal government, from the FBI. And before he would be let out of jail, his son, Charles Porter, would go partners in a law firm with a young man who just got out of law school. His name was Stephen Zappala Jr. Now, the reason why I tell you all this is because my opening statement when I did the segue was, I'm getting calls from reporters from across Pennsylvania who are saying, what's the connection between Donald Wuerl, the Pittsburgh Diocese, and D.A. Zappala? Well, that's one, because in that Altoona Johnstown case, one of the priests has Charles Porter as his attorney. So here it is, D.A. Zappala's partner in a law firm, which now that he's the DA, he's no longer involved with the law firm, but those are friendships, those are partnerships that last forever. They're still very much on talking terms. Also, in 2010, Stephen Zappala, still the DA of Allegheny County, was appointed to the U.S. Bishops' Conference board that oversees clergy sex abuse. I happen to think that's an inappropriate assignment for a sitting DA, not because it's DA Zappala, but anywhere. Also, his father, Stephen Zappala Sr., who is a former Pennsylvania Supreme Court Chief Justice, sits on the local diocesan board that reviews clergy sex abuse cases. Now, I got to tell you, I have fielded a call from Philadelphia from a person who was very, very active in the child sex abuse and cover-ups in the Catholic Church, and really in any type of agency. The call she gave, when she called me, she wanted to know one question: why are all of our elected officials afraid of the Zappalas? Well, let's go back to Chucky Porter. Chucky Porter wanted to make sure that as a mob underboss, he would get out of jail free. So he spilled his guts. I think at best he might have saved a couple of mobsters from Philly from being executed, which I personally don't care, but for the FBI, that was enough to let him out of jail. But more importantly, he gets out of jail. He establishes credibility for his entire family, even though his entire life was wasted in the mob. But now his son is partners with Stephen Zappala Jr. Instant credibility. He's part of, that pillared community. But what did it cost him? I think, and I'm speculating at this point, that Chucky Porter, who knew everything what was going on, who was bought off, who the corrupt judges were, who the corrupt police were, who the corrupt FBI agents were, gave all that information to Stephen Zappala Sr. in exchange for his son going partners with Stephen Zappala Jr., which opened a whole new life for them. Now, I'm just speculating, but I believe that's what happened. Because anything else happening with Charles Porter becoming partners with Stephen Zappala, come on. What are the odds? What are the odds of Stephen Zappala being selected to the U.S. Bishops' Conference on clergy sex abuse? This is all synchronized crime. I've gone to Zappala's detectives. Matter of fact, I do an article. I did an article years ago where I said, someday this is going to come back, and the media, Stephen Zappala, they're all going to have egg on their face. Not that it matters. They've got more than enough money to clean it up properly. But this is what you're dealing with. You had 2 dioceses in Pennsylvania investigated. The Philadelphia Archdiocese had 3 grand jury investigations. Technically, one could argue that there were 2, but the time limit ran out, so they extended it and technically created a 3rd. In the first one, they identified Cardinal Anthony Bevilacqua as a liar. Now, he was the bishop of the Pittsburgh Diocese prior to Donald Wuerl. Well, in the second and third grand jury investigation, they actually labeled Bevilacqua a criminal. Now, people would in the Catholic Church would have you believe that, well, I guess Cardinal Bevilacqua decided to shuffle these priests around and cover up for them only on the eastern side of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He never would have done that in western Pennsylvania. But that's baloney. As a matter of fact, there was a case.
I was just going to ask, why would he not have done it in western?
Pardon me?
You were saying he would have never done it in eastern Pennsylvania or western Pennsylvania, and I'm asking why.
Well, that's just it. Behavior is congruent. Not only did he do it on the eastern side, he did it here in western Pennsylvania. And the proof of the pudding is there was a recently case cited where there was a civil settlement with a man that I had talked to. I had coached him on what to do. He may have taken some of my advice, but anyway, there was a settlement. Bevilacqua, right before he went to Philly, brought in a priest that he knew was credibly accused, assigned him to a parish, and he did harm children. Okay, and that settlement just took place.
Just recently.
Right. So years ago, when I was petitioning Zappala to conduct a grand jury, he said, there's nothing to look at. Everything was fine. Everything is kosher. Well, we know that's not the case. Let me give you an example, okay? When my son, and now we're going to bounce back to where my son was shot. By the way, my son survived and thrived, just so that your listeners know. But here's the thing. About 4 or 5 weeks after the shooting, the public safety director for the city of Clerton, which is where I live, came to my house, sat down in my living room with myself and my wife, and told us that the entire case was quashed. And I said, why? He says, the best I could, and I'm talking as if he was talking to me. Scully said, the best I can tell you is that Father John Wellinger sexually abused the shooter, and as a result, the church had to cover everything up. And I said, how do you know this? And he says, well, I know some background about Wellinger. He gave me the information that I started with, and that information was that Wellinger either offered him drugs or drugged him. So he gave me contact information, and I still have the original notes. He gave me contact information, and I called the mother. The name is Ann Witkowski. I talked to Ann Witkowski over the phone. Go ahead.
The boy that shot your son's mother, the one that shot your son.
No. This is another victim of Wellinger. This was another boy at another parish that Wellinger, according to Scully, Clerton Public Safety Director Bill Scully, he told me, and I have it written on the notes, that Wellinger had drugged this other young boy, and that if I wanted to uncover the truth, that I needed to start there. So I contacted Ann. I contacted Ann Witkowski. She refused to help me, and I told her, I said, look, I don't need details. All I need is a yes or no. I want to know if Wellinger is capable of harming children. And she told me, we don't want to talk about it. Well, obviously that's an answer that says he does harm people, okay? But they refuse to talk about it.
Who is Ann? What was her name? Ann
Witkowski. W-I-T.
Witkowski.
Yeah.
And who is she again? What is her? She's
the mother of a former University of Pittsburgh student who was drugged by Wellinger. Okay?
Okay.
Now,
yeah, I just wanted to make that straight. Okay.
Now, here's how the story went. And I got to tell you, I talked to the mother, I talked to the father, and from what I understand, this story is common knowledge. And I'll explain that in a few seconds. But here's what happened. Sometime in 1987, probably February or March, Greg Witkowski, who was a student at the University of Pittsburgh, along with his brother, had an apartment. They shared an apartment together in the Oakland section of Pittsburgh. Wellinger was kind of a regular visitor there. He would bring beer in for the boys and probably drugs. And they willingly took advantage of it. They liked the idea of getting the free beer and all that. Well, on this one occasion, and it may have happened other times, but on this one occasion, Wellinger drugged Greg Witkowski. He was over 18, but the important thing is to remember in these cases that they begin luring these young boys long before they turn 18. So if you were to examine this case closely, you would find out that probably for years, Wellinger was grooming both boys to take advantage of. Anyway, Wellinger drugs Greg Witkowski. He's out for a long period of time. When he wakes up, he intuitively calls 911. He runs down one or two pairs of steps, maybe more, and meets the ambulance out in the street. They transport him to Presbyterian University Hospital, which happens to be the same hospital that saved my son's life. So I have no animosity against them. I'm merely here to tell you what I know. Anyway, the doctors and the attendants refuse treatment to Greg Witkowski.
Why?
I'm going to speculate. I'm going to guess that in 1987, if a patient was brought in that may have been harmed by a Catholic priest, you just ignored it. That's all.
Wow.
Now I can tell you this much: the parents were summoned, and Bill Scully, former Clerton Public Safety Director, informed me that there may have been a social worker that told the parents, don't try to press any charges. The Catholic Church is too powerful. Again, I don't know if that's true, but that's what Bill Scully told me. Anyway.
I've heard that before on other cases, that families are so afraid to go up against the Catholic Church because they are very powerful, and most people lose in the end anyway.
You're
they're only as powerful as their power is what you give them, what you allow them, to a point. I'm not afraid of the Catholic Church, but I'm not going up against them either. I will speak out against them all I can, every chance I can. I don't like the Catholic Church, and I think if more Catholics understood what they were supporting, instead of offering up their children to these pedophiles, they would be withdrawing from it. You got to get the people that support the church. They're the ones that you have to start with to bring the church down.
That's correct.
So I personally don't understand how you could support a church that does this to children, that hides it, that condones it, looks the other way.
Yep.
And when it's your child, then you're going to cry. Well, you know what? So I'm sorry.
You bring up a good point.
And
you
act
bring up
like
a good
that.
point.
I was just saying.
Yes, go ahead.
And not to be blind about the congregation, because they know what's going on. They know what's going on. They just turn a blind eye to it.
Well, the easiest way for me to explain it is to say this. Catholic mothers and fathers do not give a damn about any child that is being abused or harmed by a Catholic cleric as long as it's not their child. If it's not their child, they don't give, it's that simple. It is that simple. Anyway, let me get back to the Greg Witkowski case. While he's at the hospital, Wellinger follows him there. He comes into the emergency room where Witkowski was laying in bed, and Witkowski had the sense to tell Wellinger to go fetch the nurse. So Wellinger obliges. When the nurse comes in, Witkowski tells her, "This is the guy that drugged me. Get him out of here." At that point, security should have been called, if not the local police, which would have been the Pittsburgh police. However, again, everything is covered up. Witkowski goes home. He does call a young woman and tells her the whole story, because I've been in touch with the woman. So we do have people who can verify my story besides myself. Although all you got to do is call Paul Woods, who is the VP of communications at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, which is the new, what used to be Presbyterian University Hospital, is now known as the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And I'm sure he could verify this. If a push came to a shove and said, "Listen, Paul, we need to know the truth. Did this happen?" Maybe. I have this information all over the internet. If people wanted to do something about it, they could.
That's the whole point right there. That's the whole point. That summed it up in that short sentence right there. Is people, if they wanted to do something about it, they could. It's easier to turn a blind eye than it is to take on the Catholic Church.
Well, let me explain a couple of things to you. I worked 2 jobs, averaging 35 for one and 30 for the other, because I know no one will hire me at a good job. Okay. I lost a job at Cisco Food Service, probably because of my advocacy for clergy abuse victims. But that's neither here nor there. The most important thing you want to remember is when you cover up for the Catholic Church, you're going to be rewarded. How are you going to be rewarded? Scholarships for children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews at some of the finest Catholic universities and colleges across the United States. It just takes a phone call.
Basically making a deal with the devil.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I was actually offered a bribe, and I sent information over to the Vatican through the papal nuncio down in Washington, D.C., and the fellow who tried to bribe me was the Secretary of Education under Donald Wuerl when he was the bishop of the Pittsburgh Diocese.
Oh, too bad you didn't get that on tape.
What's that?
I said, too bad you didn't get that on tape.
Well, you know what? I was so angry that I just threw the guy out. But it's funny. He is now the Arch Abbot at St. Vincent's College and Seminary, where he has been credibly accused of sexual harassment, molestation. I'm not sure what level it was, but he weaseled his way out of it because the fellow who did the investigating was basically his boss, who was also credibly accused of sexual abuse. So it's really just a joke. I mean, yeah. Now, for anybody who would like to visit this stuff and see what a joke this place is, you can go to Misconduct in Latrobe. And my article is one of the first articles to appear on there. The letter that was sent to the Vatican concerning Norwicki offering me a bribe is on there. There's a lot of stuff on there.
Can you tell, code for me really quick, Mike? I'm trying to pull it up.
Okay.
How do you spell trobe?
Yeah, misconduct.
Right.
At
in
Latrobe.
At Latrobe.
In Latrobe. Latrobe.
Oh, okay, perfect. It did come up.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to post that link underneath the event just in case anybody wants to see it.
Right. Also, you can post to get a better idea of how this work and their connection to Chucky Porternet. You can also post the Ference will, and that's FERENCE will WHEEL, and there's several stories. Okay, there's several stories on there, articles that I wrote, and they can do some research and see what they think of that and get a better idea of what I've been going through.
Does your son remember? Does your son remember the incident leading up to the shooting?
Oh yeah. He was.
What exactly happened?
He was actually. How can I say it? He was actually more dazed than anything. Believe it or not. He was actually walking around the bus, kind of out of really not knowing what was going on. Ironically, there was a monk from Sarah who probably saved his life because he prevented him from going into shock. Unfortunately, about 15 years later, an associate of mine and myself would dig up the information that this monk was credibly accused of sexually abusing two twin brothers. Sadly, one of those twin brothers, after getting a settlement from the Catholic Church, would commit suicide with a shotgun blast to his head. Probably about a year or two later, we would discover another priest from Sarah Catholic High School who was also credibly accused of sexually abusing someone, and he was teaching at Widener University in Pennsylvania. So he was out having a great time. Well, I published the articles on the internet. Then a paper in Philadelphia picked it up. I think it was a Philadelphia Inquirer, and they ended up sending out letters. But again, my friends and I are doing the work of law enforcement, elected officials, and of course the Roman Catholic Church, and we do it for free.
Yeah.
Anyway, somebody has to do it. You know what I mean?
Right. But I mean, you had this incident before the incident with your child. Was this even anything that was on your radar?
No. This is the first time anything like. I mean, honestly, I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 8 years. I never had a problem. I probably would not have changed growing up because, I had a good time. There was a certain amount of discipline, but, a certain amount of discipline is good for most kids. But once I started digging, I'm telling you, the Catholic Church is a mess.
Oh, yes.
And anyone who tries to say differently, they're trying to snooker you.
Right. So my question was before the shooting. If you remember what the events that led up to it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the shooter was right behind him, and he was kicking the back of my son's seat.
On the bus.
So my son just turned around and said, "Hey, come on, knock it off," And probably just a few minutes later, that's when he pulls the gun out and shoots my son.
So the kid was looking for a trigger for a reason.
Well, they interviewed his girlfriend, or at least somebody, and I have it on the police report. Or, no, not the police report, it's the coroner's report. The mayor of McKeesport, about 10 years later, refused to give me the police report, which I still don't have. But his girlfriend, the shooter's girlfriend, was interviewed by police, and she had indicated that he was probably suicidal for some time.
Wow.
I didn't even get to
I want to go ahead.
I didn't even get to the best part. You know, probably the biggest reason this is that besides Wellinger sexually abusing the shooter, but another reason why it was covered up is because the shooter and his friends were very much involved in the occult and Satanism. So that's just one more reason. That's just one more reason that the Catholic Church has to step in and cover it up. As a matter of fact, this happened at around 8 o'clock in the morning, and the police were not permitted to enter Sarah Catholic High School for over 24 hours.
How is that possible?
Well, that's what I asked the former police chief, who again was very much rewarded throughout his career. But that's what I asked him. I said, in other words, the wishes of a local Catholic priest trumps the law of the land. He says, no, it's not like that. He says, you have to understand, they were badgering me to close the case, and by that I mean the spokesperson for the Pittsburgh Diocese, Ron Langwin, who's kind of like a pit bull. They were badgering the police chief to close the case, and he probably did submit to their will and closed it a little prematurely. And again, if you go to the website, the Ferentz Will, there's a lot of articles that'll fill in some of the details.
Okay. Mike, I want to ask you, I know you're not done telling us what's going on, but I hope that this comes out the right way, because I told you when I spoke to you privately that my husband and I have been following cases like this for a while, with the pedophilia and then moving these Catholic priests from one place to the next, and no one ever gets charged. But it seems like a common, I don't even know what the word is, something that's very common is that I know that girls are being possibly raped, but definitely molested in the Catholic Church. But it's so much more prominent for it with young men. And I'm wondering, is it because it's harder for the boys, the men, the young men to speak up, and they know this. The elders of the church are the ones that are committing these crimes and sexually molesting these boys. They know it's like if they say something, it's like going to be an embarrassment to them, and like, oh, how could you let that happen to yourself? I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, because I don't get it.
No,
I don't get it.
It's easier
so prominent with boys.
Because it's easier for them to be alone with boys than it is with girls.
I don't think there's necessarily one answer that'll solve this question for you. But I will tell you this much. This has been going on for centuries. Okay? These priests, bishops, and cardinals are experts at abusing, at covering up. They're experts. Now, keep in mind that we are now, thanks to the writings of a woman by the name of Randy Engel, we are now in the third generation of what I would call dysfunctional sex freaks being promoted to the level of cardinals. I believe she traced it back to Cushing, Spellman, and a whole bunch of others. Okay? Now, here's what happens when a priest or a bishop abuses a seminarian or another priest or another bishop or a kid in the classroom. That that sets up the priest, bishop, or cardinal to be blackmailed. So now, not only does he have to cover up his sins, his crimes, he has to cover up the crimes of all the other priests, of all the other seminarians, of all the other bishops and cardinals who know about him. Does that make sense to you? And that's what's going on right now in the Catholic Church. It's so corrupt that even the good priests cannot step forward and make a complaint, because if they do, they're doomed. There's nowhere to go. I have a simple saying. I've been doing this stuff for 25 years, over 25 years, and I still don't know where to tell victims or survivors of clergy sex abuse where to go for help. I really don't know. I can make some suggestions. I can offer some help, but I don't know if they're really going to receive any help. It's the same thing for a good priest. There's nowhere for him to go, because if he goes to the bishop is going to say, oh, guess what? You're going to Haiti for the next 3 years. There's a great missionary down there. Remember to pack enough bottled water so that you won't, catch Montezuma's revenge. But anyway, that's it's so corrupt. Just like the Pennsylvania government.
I don't know
Whoops. Am I starting to lose you?
No, that's actually, that noise is, Michelle, are you outside?
No.
No.
Okay. There was a lot of backbeat coming from Michelle.
Oh.
All right, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
that was me. I walked into the lobby to get a soda.
Oh, okay.
So
anyway, everything is just so corrupt that there's nowhere for people like me to go to. I mean, I can call this guy. I can go to the FBI, and I have letters from Senator Arlen Specter, who says he called the Pennsylvania Attorney's Office on my behalf. But again, nothing was done, and nothing will be done until they go in to each and every diocese and subpoena the secret archives. That's where they've got all the records of the cover-ups, the abusive priests, and all the deals that were made. They are required by canon law to keep the secret archives, and they went into the Altoona diocese, or the Altoona-Johnstown diocese, and they got those secret archives, and that's what exposed much of the things that went on. Although there was also a whistleblower like myself in the Altoona-Johnstown diocese who people would call for help because they knew they couldn't trust the local district attorney, the local police chief. So they went to a guy like me down here, and they asked for help. Like I said, I've been doing this.
I don't think that we'll ever really see an effective prosecution of any priest on a large scale, because if you're going to do one, you're going to have to do another, and then another, and that will bring the entire church to its knees.
Well, that's exactly what needs to be done so that they can start over, get a fresh start. I mean, it's no different than Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany was basically destroyed, and then they started over. So the same thing with Japan. That's what needs to be done with the Catholic Church. Tear it down, start all over, or maybe maybe call it something else. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I know I don't go to the Catholic Church anymore. I doubt if I would ever step into a Catholic church other than for maybe a wedding or something like that, or a funeral. But there's nothing there for me.
I'm just having such a hard time grasping that we can't even go to our local police with these problems, that the church and I know it to be true, that anywhere that you go, the police are going to obviously go to the church, probably to the archbishop, or who's highest at that church. I'm not sure on the Catholic scale, and that they're going to get any resolve. I mean, how do they get around the police doing their job? I mean,
well,
I can't wrap my head around that, Mike.
Don't forget. Don't forget, the Catholic Church has a very, very secret weapon that they can bring out anytime they want to. It's called confession. And there's a lot of politicians who are Catholic, and believe me, if all I have to do if I'm the bishop is, okay, so this police chief wants to make his legacy on my turf, right? I just call up the local priest and I say, okay, give me some of the goings on in the confessional when that police chief comes in. What?
Oh,
yeah, you heard me. You want to go to Haiti? You know what I mean? Look, if you can rape and sodomize a 10, 11-year-old boy, if you can take an 11-year-old girl, get her pregnant, and this happened in the Philadelphia Archdiocese, take her to get an abortion when she's 12 years old and leave her there on her own, don't even have the sense or the decency to go in with the girl, then believe me, you can, blow the whistle on what these politicians, police chiefs, and other elected officials are confessing in the confessional. And you don't have to be a rocket science. You don't have to be a rocket science.
Everybody's secret. Once one secret gets out, then everybody's secret comes out.
Yep.
So I don't know. All I know is, the Catholic Church is very corrupt, and children are suffering. And when they're no longer children, they're adults that are suffering, and the cycle just continues.
Yeah.
It goes around and around and around. Everybody's like, oh, why is this happening? What can we do? Well, get off your damn phone, get out in front of the TV, and get out and do something. Speak up, make your voice heard. Don't just say, oh, I'm sorry to hear it, and then, go about your business. Nothing is going to get accomplished that way.
What I started to say was I've been doing this for over 25 years. I still don't know where to tell someone to go for help, but I can tell you this much. If you want to cover up any crimes committed by a Catholic priest, bishop, cardinal, all you have to do is call 911, and they'll take care of it.
They'll cover it up for you.
And I challenge any police chief, any district attorney to tell me otherwise.
Right.
It's that simple.
Pedophiles are being stripped around and let loose on children, and there's people sitting behind bars for smoking a joint. Where's the justice in that?
I agree. Hey, you're preaching to the choir. It's just not a Catholic choir.
There you go. It amazes me, Mike. Go ahead, Michelle.
Go ahead.
No, I'd say no. That's basically how it is, though.
It is. and nothing can be done.
The monsters are guarding the gates.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I got quiet all of a sudden. I told Michelle that we talk all the time, but I told her before the show that you had so much going on that literally your story and everything you've got going on would make your head spin. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. My head's still spinning, trying to comprehend everything because it's just like, wow. I mean, how long it took. I mean, you've been doing this 25 years, you said. 25 years of your life has been dedicated to exposing the corruption, and you still don't know who to tell them to go to. And that just goes to show that
has heard the story.
It goes to show the long arm of the Catholic Church has reached out and touched someone. And I hate saying it that way, but 25 years of your life, and you and by no fault of your own, you can't trust anybody.
You're still not any further than day one.
Nope. And, let me just say this too. Keep in mind, my son survived and thrived. I've got 7 grandchildren. I've got plenty of things to do, without spending probably a good I don't know, 20 or 30 hours on this stuff every week. But I can't give it up because people come to me for help. They don't know where else to go. It's really...
No. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's really sad. And I challenge any elected official to say, Mike Ferentz, you know what? We think you're full of poop. I challenge him this. I will publicly debate any cardinal, bishop, elected official, district attorney, anybody from the Zappala crime family, anybody. I met with 2 agents from the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, okay? I had all my notes prepared. I sent them a synopsis. They didn't take one piece of paper. They didn't take the notes that Scully gave me, you know? They don't want to, you know, the easiest
they don't
way
want to
to
know
cover
the truth.
up, they don't want to know it. So you just cover up by not asking, you know, don't ask the tough questions.
It's easier to deny when you don't know, you know, when you refuse to hear the truth. It's easier to deny it.
Let me tell you something.
And the sad thing is your son went through this. Your son was shot in the head.
Yeah.
And where was the justice for him? I mean, that bullet should have been meant for that priest.
Yeah. Not only that, my son went through about 8 hours of intensive neurosurgery, okay? That night, I went home. I took my daughter home. My wife stayed with my son for the entire 10 or 14 days, never leaving the hospital once. She would sneak in to take showers in kind of like a public area for where some of the patients would take a shower. She would sneak in there with the okay of the nurses because she had been there for 10 to 14 days. Anyway, the very night of the shooting, and keep in mind, remember I told you, the police were not allowed into Sarah Catholic High School, even though one could have labeled that a crime scene, because the boy's locker was important. They took out information that proved that he was involved with Satanism, but it also proved that he was at a very high level of interest in Satanism. But anyway, guess what happened at 11 o'clock at night as my son was trying desperately to recover not only from the neurosurgery, but from what took place that day? The headmaster from Sarah Catholic High School comes down, and in the pious voice that is taught to them in Pious 101 at the seminary, asked my wife if he could visit with my son. Well, he was in intensive care, so they had to use the phone to even get in. And when they got the okay to go in, my wife is following the priest, and he said, I'd like to talk to Adam alone, if that's okay. You can never say no to a priest. That son of a bitch was in there for over 2 or 3 hours questioning my son on what he knew about the shooter. Basically, if you think about it, it would have been like being drilled by an attorney until you crack.
I think there was a little bit of deprogramming going on there as well.
Yep. They wanted to know
exactly.
if my son wasn't a friend of the shooter, and he wasn't an enemy. My son was into sports. He had a nice part-time job. He was actually a commissioned salesman selling computers at age 16 for a local computer company. He did very well. So his time was spent in positive activities. He was headed in a very good direction in his life, and but the other boy was into Satanism and the occult like the rest of his friends. And yet the Catholic Church comes down hard on my family, my son, and we did nothing wrong.
Right. Well, that's how it is all the time in any justice situation. You know, it's the victims that always get drilled. The victims are always at fault, according to everybody else, when they shouldn't be, you know, it shouldn't be like that at all.
Mike, let me ask
I'm sorry
you a
this happened to your son.
Pardon me?
I said, I'm sorry this happened to your son and to your family. I mean, it's not right.
Well, you you got to take what life gives you and just somehow do the best you can, and that's what we've tried to do. And I'm just glad that my son somehow survived, and that. But don't get me wrong, it has taken its toll on my family. But there's nowhere for us to go. I mean, when the Catholic Roman Catholic Church wants to retaliate, they know exactly how to do it.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Mike.
Go ahead.
Let me just let everybody know we're about 20 minutes left in this show. And, Mike, what I would like to do is me and Michelle both would need to go through those two web pages, Misconduct in Latrobe and the Ferris Wheel, because we talked about having you come back on the show. And we'll talk more about that right before we end this show. But I have a question. This is 25 years ago. How does your son feel about what you're doing now?
I made a decision to do this, and that's what I'm doing. We don't talk about it as a family. I do this, on my own, and I will continue to do it on my own. And that's about the way it goes.
You made that promise. I understand that.
Yeah. You're fulfilling the promise that you made. And I think you're very commendable, especially coming up against the many brick walls that I know you've hit along the way. You keep plugging away, and that's very commendable.
Well, this has been the fight of my life. And, after you make it 5 rounds, 10 rounds, 15 rounds, 20 rounds, and then you start 25 rounds or 25 years, and you're so beat up, the punches don't even hurt. The kicking in the gut, you get right up. And I can't criticize my family because they're not involved the way I am. However, they had to deal with the tragedy the best way they could, and they have done it, and I'm happy for them. I am dealing with that tragedy in the same way, or not the same way, but on my terms. They have dealt with it on their terms, and, you just hope for the best no matter what. And I will continue to fight the Roman Catholic Church until justice is served.
I would very much would like to fight that fight with you. I mean, for years I've always preached that, the Catholic Church this, the Catholic Church that. You can't trust anything the Catholic Church has to say. But I try not to offend the Catholics, but I know that I do. And, it's not their fault that they don't see it or they choose not to see the truth. But, one day there's going to be a reckoning, and, God's going to ask them, well, you were told, this was happening to my children, to your children. Why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you speak up? And, Mike, you are going to be one of the few that will be able to stand there and say, I did. I did stand up. I did speak out.
I don't know how people cannot speak up.
Right. These are children. Children are not for sex.
No.
I mean, there's all kinds. That's one of my pet peeves that really gets my goat. The children, the pedophiles, and the children, and then he mixed the religion into it, who is separated from church and state, who is basically protected by the government. It's like, what do you do? Where can you go? It's like you found out. It's difficult. There aren't a whole lot of places you can turn to.
Nope. I don't want to. I normally don't ask survivors, what happened. I just say, I understand you've been harmed, and leave it at that. But there was one gentleman who told me when he was 5 and 6 years old when the abuse started, and he told me the priest would bring a puppy or a kitten to wherever they were going to be abused. And they would let the boys play with the kitten or the puppy and get attached. You know, face it, the easiest thing to get attached to is a little puppy or a little kitten. Anyway, once to get their point across, the priest would then step on the skull of the puppy or kitten. This is very graphic, but it needs to be told, and I apologize. But this is what a 5, 6, 7-year-old boy would see. The priest would then slowly crush the skull of the kitten or the puppy, and that would serve as a reminder to those poor young boys that those priests meant business. You do what we tell you to do or else. He also told me that it was not unusual to go to school and all of a sudden there would be a boy missing, never to be heard of or about again. No questions asked. Now, he told me there was much more to this than just abuse, that it was call it a ring of sorts that they knew exactly, you know, they were very well protected. They were very much into this abuse, and I guess that's all I'm going to say. But anyway, that's what goes on.
You know what's really eerie to me is the documentary that my husband and I watched. There was one part where one of the priests would go and pick up this one particular little boy, and he would supposedly was supposed to be taking him to feed the elderly, kind of like a Meal on Wheels type thing. And this started at about 6 or 7 for this young man, and it continued up until his early 20s before he ever spoke up. And the only reason he did speak up is because the priest had been doing it to someone else, and into his early 20s, and he finally said something to him. They both shared stories, and that's how their story got out. But that priest is, God only knows where. Nobody knows where he's at.
Yeah.
I mean,
because the church hides him.
This was a thing that was on the news, and they were actively pursuing where this preacher or priest was, and they could not get answers. I mean, literally, the doors to the church were closed on them. They would, go to priests and cardinals' homes as they're getting out of their vehicles and try to question them, and there's no comment. And I can't even imagine the hold that they have on these kids.
Yeah.
I mean, what you just said about the animals, it blows me away, because my daughter, she's only 11 years old, and if somebody were to hurt an animal in front of her, she would do anything to stop it from happening. And I mean anything.
Yeah.
Including submitting to being sexually abused.
Pardon me?
Barbie? Would that include being sexually abused?
I think that she would. I mean, I talk to her every day before she walks out of my house. She's got her cell phone. When she's going to go to a friend's, we stay on the phone with each other until she gets to where she's going, because I'm not ready to let her go. Everybody's saying, oh, she's old enough to do it on her own, but I'm not ready to let her go. Someone was hurting an animal, yes, I do think that she would do anything to stop it from being hurt. She comes home on a weekly basis with a dog or cat that they found, and it just looks horrible. And the kids all get together, and they'll go knock on people's doors to see if it was their dog. If not, we take them to the SPCA. But, yeah, I'm deathly afraid that if someone was to do any harm to an animal or threaten harm to an animal in her presence, unless she did something, that she would probably do it. Even though she's been told over and over, she has that heart, like Mike, you don't know, but Michelle and I both are big-time animal activists, and I had a rescue when I lived up in Georgia, and Cassie's just grown up to love animals, all animals, and she respects their life. And you know, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but yeah, sadly, Michelle, I'm afraid that she would be rused into doing just about anything if someone was threatening to harm an animal, and that scares me to death.
Can I read you something? Remember I told you that the boy and his friends were involved in Satanism, ritual abuse, things like that.
Yes, and then I want to touch on that subject right there when you're done. Okay?
A woman contacted me about this. A woman contacted me about this probably about 7 years ago. Remember, the shooting for my son happened in McKeesport. We live in a place called Clerkton. Well, this woman was a volunteer for the animal care and welfare. She contacted me because these areas were very troublesome. She was a volunteer for a couple, Ed and Kay Blotzer, in 1970. From 1980 till 1995. Ed was a humane agent, dedicated volunteer, and he arrested animal abusers, including animal sacrifice, satanic cult, and dogfighting cases in the McKeesport, Clerkton, Braddock area. And it was during a time when police were not interested in bringing these abusers to justice. They had meetings once a month, and they would report on the different cases and the convictions. And Ed, who was dedicated, had a mantra. And his mantra was, kids who abuse animals go on to abuse people. And that boy who shot my son abused animals. I tried to get Ed's records, but they have since been destroyed or lost or what have you. Ed and his wife passed away. But as you can see, there were people who came to me with supportive evidence to help make my case. But again, there's nobody listening. I don't have a badge or even a press pass. So people don't have to pay attention to me. It's that simple.
It's sad.
They don't have to, but I can tell you right now, there are a lot of people, their ears are perking up, and they need to be.
I hope so.
Well, you know, and back to the devil worshiping thing, which I am actually not surprised that it was there within the church. The Seventh-day Adventist has, they believe, well, it's put out there in one of their pamphlets that the Antichrist is the Pope himself, and they've gotten it down. They, broke it down with the Roman numerals, where the vicar, it breaks down to 666. Anyway, besides that, have you ever noticed, like when there's a new pope, when they bring the new pope in, the smoke and all that, the pope looks totally different when he comes out. He's sequestered for a week. But when he comes back out of that, named as Pope, I'm wondering if anybody's ever paid attention enough to notice the difference between before he went in and after he came out. His eyes they're like sunken. He just looks different. And in a lot of his pictures where he's got that grin where he just looks evil, you can just see the demon inside him. In the pictures, I mean, I Google the Pope and look at the pictures and look at their eyes and see if you can find a picture of him before he was Pope and compare the two. There is definitely something that is in that church, but it is not of God. And that's a huge statement to make, but I stand by it. I fully, wholeheartedly believe that.
Well, you don't have to try too hard to convince me, I'll tell you, because what I know, and we only covered some of it today, what I know, it's not a church.
No, it's not. Not of God.
No.
Not of God. No. Anybody that abuses children, it's the most innocent of all humans.
And then follow up animals abusing the children, but then also animals who are totally helpless.
And the animals, well, yeah. I mean, anybody that's going to abuse the children has no problem abusing an animal.
Right.
You know, I was talking with someone the other day. We were trying to, talk about, it's like the question you asked before about, is it about sex or, we're not so sure it's even about sex. We know it's about power and the deception of fooling the people, and the sex with the boys is just because it's the boys are there. They normally don't want to talk about it after it's happened, and it takes years for them to finally get up the courage to face what took place. But it's difficult. I don't know. Like I said, it's
a vicious cycle, and it continues until we stop it. I don't know that we personally can stop it, but the human race together can stop it if we all just pull together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not trying to give our show a plug, but it's things like we're doing today that make other people aware that these things are going on, and maybe they didn't know before today.
Yeah.
And now they're going to go to those websites that Mike had mentioned, Misconduct in Latrobe and the Ferentz Wheel. By the way, I have posted those on the event as well as in our chat room for the station. It's people that stand up and speak up like Mike, and avenues like the ones we have, Michelle. We're very lucky to have a place where people can come and let other people know that this is really what's going on and that there is a cover-up, and we've got to come together and make a stand, and the only way it's going to stop is if people do come together.
Right, and I do want to read up on all your stuff, Mike, because I did come into this I said I am going to read up on all your articles and on everything that you have, so that we can talk again. Because I basically came into this conversation with you unarmed. I was, with Larry, I was familiar with it, the whole case and everything, and I tried to do a little research today. It just didn't happen. So yeah, I am going to read up on everything you have, and I'll have my voice back, and we can have we'll have a really good conversation next time.
Right.
Okay.
We'll get more in depth into it.
We're down to about 1 minute and 10 seconds. So, Mike, let me and Michelle get a hold of the web pages, and once we do a little bit of following up and getting back in touch with you, set up another show where we can take the full 2 hours. I would love to do that. And maybe even another show. I know we talked about it. You've got so much going on. But I want to thank you so much again for coming on the show. I'm sorry for the circumstances, but thank you so much, and keep speaking up and keep helping other people speak up.
Well, I intend to, and like I said, through this ordeal, I've met so many wonderful survivors, and I only wish I could do more for them. That's.
Oh, we will. We will do it.
And
together we'll do it.
And thank you again for giving me a chance.
Guys. Thank you so much, Mike, and I will be talking to you soon.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Mike.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
You've just been stripped. Thanks for listening to Stripped Radio. where it's real, it's raw, it's Real Raw Radio.